I have had this thumbnail in my thumbnail folder for over 2.5 years and honestly assumed I'd never use it. For some reason though, I didn't want to get rid of it either, but after witnessing the radical, structurally altering gameplay quirks of Nadland's characters, from each of them having an alternate battle and exploration stance to unique mechanics like Chaska's ability to deal non-corresponding elemental damage, I now know exactly what to do with this thumbnail. An aspect of Genshin Impact's lore that carries a ton of narrative significance yet hasn't been touched on all that much is Delusions. The source of every character's power is a vision, a jeweled amulet that grants the holder the privilege of channeling one of the 7 elements. It's the basis of which the entire game's narrative and gameplay foundation has been built upon. Naturally, the quote-unquote evil counterpart raises many interesting questions, and there have been tons of videos made over the years theorizing delusions and the potential repercussions they may have, mostly from a lore perspective. What I want to do though is theorize how they could be applied from a gameplay perspective. Genshin's at a point where, like I said, new units are pushing the needle on what is possible in a character, not just having special mechanics, but altering the fundamentals of the game itself. This has me believing there's a possibility Hoyo is going to be more ambitious with new releases going forward. So let's talk Delusions today, come up with some ideas on how they can be implemented in-game based on the knowledge we have of their capability, and maybe throw in a couple of my own ideas. Okay, background information, let's start there. What are delusions? For the 2.5 of you who don't know, delusions are essentially artificial visions manufactured by the Fatui that draw from the remains of dead gods and other powerful beings, having almost identical effects to visions both in form and function, except in regards to form they take a more dull, darker image, usually only sharing the color of the element, not the actual insignia. You can see Child's Electro Delusion looks identical to Arlecchino's Pyro Delusion as far as the symbol goes. Presumably, delusions possess power even greater than visions themselves. I mean, I can believe it. Have you seen the immense might of copium and the sheer delulu brain rot it causes? Don't ask me how I know what copium feels like, I just know. Such power is not given freely, however, in exchange for their incredible might and more importantly accessibility, in that anyone can make use of them compared to vision holders who are carefully selected. Delusions come with a number of unpleasant side effects that vary from person to person depending on how it's made. Most commonly, using the delusion results in physical backlash to the wielder. You may recall back in version 2's Archon quest, Tepe underwent rapid aging and eventually died from using a delusion, likely as a result of it draining his life force. There was also a recount of Crepus, Diluc's father, using a delusion and dying because of it. The actual consequences of using a delusion are lacking in consistency though. Tepe and Crepus both passed away shortly after taking up a delusion, but Diluc was able to use it for 3 years without any visible signs of damage. Members of the Fatui make liberal use of them and they seem to be fine, at least from what we observe. Signora and Child use their delusion and ostensibly walk away from it okay. Well, I mean the former is dead, but that's for an entirely different reason. As for Child, the physical toll comes not from his delusion but from the foul legacy transformation, which is a different thing altogether. Although it's been stated that Signora's delusion was notably different, my guess is that it depends on where it came from. The ones mass-produced in the Inazuma were probably not above board, while the ones bestowed by the Tsaritsa herself might be of a higher and safer quality. Point is, there's no confirmed baseline of what delusions actually do or what happens to you if you use them, but you know how it goes. They're sort of your Faustian bargains condensed into an edgy piece of jewelry. You become big strong if you use it, but then it does recoil damage or something. I don't know, I just think of them as dark chips from Mega Man Battle Network or the curse mark from Naruto. But I digress. A big thing to make note of is that it's possible for one's delusion to be of an element not corresponding to their vision if they have one, demonstrated by Child who bears a Hydro vision but has an Electro delusion. Arlecchino has a Pyro delusion and Pyro vision, but seeing as how a delusion has no prerequisite to being obtained and used, it's safe to assume, for example, a Geo character can use an Anemo delusion or a Cryo character can use a Pyro delusion, so on and so forth. Now that we're all caught up with that, let's talk about their potential applications in-game if hypothetically they were to become a mechanic at some point. We know that delusions offer a stronger boost in power with self-inflicted damage or something to that effect. Again, it's not consistent. Given that a character can wield a delusion with a different element than their vision, it'll be a waste of time trying to theorize who gets what element specifically. Bennett can have an Electro delusion, Fischl can have a Geo delusion, Ayaka can get a Hydro delusion for all the difference it makes. Instead, I want to touch more on how the mechanics will play out, regardless of the element a character's delusion is. Bear in mind, this is all hypothetical and not confirmed, so if you're wondering if I'm being sneaky and talking about leaks, these are all from my own thoughts. Or this could be the funniest coincidence of all time and they actually are making delusions playable in version 5, I don't know. Despite Child staying on his bow the entire time he's using Hydro during his boss fight, we know from the actual playable character that Child can switch to Lance and Daggers while in Hydro. When he switches to Electro, he then goes full melee with those same Lance and Daggers in hand. From this, we can rule out the possibility of delusions granting an entire new set of abilities. Or at least to keep it simple, we should act under the assumption that characters maintain the same kit, otherwise we'd have to essentially make brand new stuff for everyone, which, I mean, it would be more fun and potentially give the lesser powerful units a second lease on life, but let's not get too far ahead. Granted, we know that Signora's cryo powers come from her delusion, while her pyro powers come from studying pyro magic and then later becoming the Crimson Witch. She does not have a pyro vision. Said cryo delusion, being used to keep herself from literally burning to death, gives off the impression that delusions can give custom powers. From her boss fight in Tenshukaku, she throws ice shards and frozen wheels at the player, then later summons a hailstorm of icicles to rain down on you, among other attacks. When she goes Crimson Witch, aside from the anti-burst damage and counter, she shares no attacks between her phase 1 and 2. For example, one of her moves has her cracking a flaming whip at you. You don't see an ice version of that in phase 1, but that's likely as a result of her fire attacks coming from her own special powers, much like how Child's File Legacy is a custom power of his that doesn't come from his delusion. Chances are, if delusions ever become playable, I doubt Hoyo will make a brand new set of abilities for every character. If anything, what I think they might do is follow in the footsteps of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and pull Terrestrialization. For the uninitiated, Terrestrialization is a mechanic in Pokemon's most recent versions wherein you can select up to one Pokemon on your team and be able to change their type mid-battle. It can be any type you want. Now, some Pokemon have a unique Terrestrialization form that gives them a brand new ability and greater changed appearance. Or technically only 2 Pokemon do. Ogerpon and Terapagos get a lot more than just a type change. We can do the same thing here. At its core, all a delusion will do is change the elemental properties of a character. So if Kotsing gets a cryo delusion for instance, her skill and burst will be ice themed. Obviously they'll have to make adjustments to account for certain mechanics that depend on element specific properties. If Kosoa gets an electro delusion, then we'll have to do something about his A1 and A4 passives given he's not Anemo during that time, but passives can easily get reworked around. For his A4, instead of Swirl, we can make it based on Electro reactions. So if you do Quicken, then it shreds Electro or Dendro resistance. Yes, the ramifications of changing a unit's element are vast in scope. I said many times in the past that several of Genshin's characters could be a lot better if only they were a different element. It's true their kits are designed around being the element they are, but it definitely makes you wonder how would Goro function if he was a Pyro character, or how Genyu would turn out if she was Dendro. Now, for units' entire identity revolves around the element they are, like Chevreuse and Nilou, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, but fortunately that doesn't apply to the majority of the cast. A Hydro Shangling, a Pyro Yelan, a Cryo Navia. Cryo Navia would be an excellent reverse melter. Maybe a Geoshogun if you really want to go crazy. Look, we can sit here debating about how f***ed everything would get all the livelong day. That being said, for most units, even if their base kits can theoretically function as a different element, I understand things like their personal weapon and constellations would need serious retuning. It's a what if video, let's just have fun. Moving on, next, how do players tap into a unit's delusion? An easy solution would be to just add a new hotkey. To my knowledge, beyond Child's File Legacy transformation, there's no record of a character being able to use both their vision and delusion simultaneously, and for simplicity's sake in-game, they should avoid cross-pollination as well. I think using a delusion would be like entering a stance, kinda like Farina's Osea and Numa versions. You can only use one or the other, never both at the same time, because can you imagine Hu-Tao's setting up her own Vaporize? That would be insane. All Nanlan units come with a Night Soul state wherein they get a custom stamina meter that determines how long they can stay in that mode for, and it can be extended further while in Nanlan by way of the Phlogiston mechanic. The same can be done here. Swapping to a delusion is a temporary state that changes your skill, burst, and other properties for a short period of time. It could be based on a child skill system where the longer you stay in it, the longer the cooldown will be when you get out. Furthermore, to represent the backlash of using a delusion, we can make it so past a certain point, say arbitrarily 10 seconds, if you stay in delusion for longer than that, you'll take damage over time that gets increasingly stronger, making it so past a certain point, you'll take more damage than you have the capacity to heal, and you have to either switch back to your base element or die. Tactically, you can abuse this to intentionally get yourself to low health, so characters like Hu-Tao can access a low HP pyro damage bonus, but for most units, this could present a high risk, high reward type thing where you want to go delusion, get your damage or other stuff off quickly, then get out. That would be how I envision delusions being used. The longer you're in it for, the more self-inflicted damage you take. I think the biggest benefit of delusions is that it can create exponentially more combinations for gameplay, allowing players to experiment for months on end. What if we had a team consisting of a Pyro Yaemiko, Pyro Yelan, Pyro Kokomi, and a Hydro Ayaka? What if you could massively buff Nilou teams by turning Kosuha or Venti into Hydro? What if, and hear me out, what if we could save Chichu by making her Dendro? What if we could make Ito Pyro? What if Dio was Hydro? The possibilities would be infinite. Theory crafters would never touch grass ever again, but I mean they don't touch grass anyway. However, I can acknowledge there are substantial negatives to such an idea. One possible concern from allowing delusions to be playable is that it can pose a threat to unit diversity. Enabling characters to change their element while retaining their general feel essentially takes away any incentive for players to go after a character with a similar playstyle for that element, because you could just take an existing character and give them a delusion for that element. For instance, Shinobu will lose a lot of market value if you gave Kokomi an Electro Delusion, as the latter's Jellyfish has the exact same functionality as Shinobu's skill, Application, and Healing. I know Shinobu's follows you around and has more forgiving uptime, but you get the idea. It's a question of overlap. If Shunhua became Dendro, Pyro, what have you, she could bring her immense buffing utility over there. Nahida becoming Hydro would be absolutely insane. It could run the risk of an already powerful character becoming even more powerful. I for one shudder to imagine a Cryo or Animo Bennett. One advantage to having a type chart like Genshin's elements is that it allows Hoyo to give characters a distinct purpose. You can argue that Kokomi and Shinobu have the same overall purpose of healing and application, but what makes them unique is their element. Allowing Delusions to change a character's element makes it so potentially the entire roster can be Hydro, the entire roster can be Geo, the entire roster can be Animo. It wouldn't be a can of worms, it would be an entire tank of worms. Also, it could cause a ton of plot holes. Take the Archons. It would be canonically uncharacteristic of the Animo Archon to go Electro, or the Electro Archon to be Geo, or the Geo Archon to be Hydro. Not only would the Archons never be caught dead using a Delusion, but it kind of goes against the whole theme. The Archons are supposed to be the quintessential experience of their respective elements. Switching to a different element breaks the immersion. Narratively speaking, that's kind of the point of Delusions. They're items that commit sacrilege against the gods, and the whole idea of visions being a blessing, not something you can just engineer and give to anyone. Like I said, they're Faustian bargains designed to corrupt the wielder, so canonically it makes total sense for, say, Venti using a Pyro Delusion to be a violation of the ethos he represents. An easy way to prevent the "if everyone is super, no one will be" outcome is predetermining every unit's vision. Kanish can only switch to Hydro, Child can only switch to Electro, Mona can only switch to Geo. Stuff like that, but once again that would be a fairly arduous undertaking since people might complain about how, oh, Ganyu would canonically make more sense to have a Pyro Delusion, or Shao should have a Geo Delusion. It would be a big mess. But I still think it should be easier than if they were to just make it open-ended for the player. Genshin Impact's not a sandbox game, and I don't think Hoyo would give us that kind of freedom. Every character has a defined identity, so if Delusions were ever at all to be added, it would be done so in a curated fashion. What about doing it for new characters thereafter? That might be the safest option, introducing a character who was intended to play with two elements from the start. Having just gotten Shaska, we know Hoyo's not against people using elements other than theirs. So if they make a future character, Capitano, have a delusion worked into his actual gameplay, then we could start from there. So we can give delusions only to characters who canonically would be inclined to use them, but if that's the case, they would definitely need to let Child have his Electro delusion. Arlecchino is fine, her delusion's the same as her vision anyway, but I feel like Child fans would be ultra pissed if they started making delusions a thing and didn't retrofit him to use his. Actually, now that I think of it, maybe that's why they're intentionally holding off on releasing Harbingers, because they want to save them for Snezhnaya so they can unveil the special gimmick. They could be saving Delusions for when we make it to Snezhnaya to reveal that as like the special thing. I suppose I'll have to wait until next year for that. In any case, I want to see Delusions made into an actual gameplay element. They're such an integral part of the game's story, and the Fatui is built up as the shadowy organization pulling the strings behind everything. They were talked about a lot in version 2, and then they were kind of forgotten about ever since. I'm aware they brought it up in, I believe, Emily's story quest, but apart from that, I don't think it's ever been involved in the main story again. Whether they make a stance type effect or maybe just a character special mechanic, they should make Delusions a thing. If you guys have any thoughts or ideas on implementing Delusions, would you do it like how I theorized, or would you go in an entirely different direction? I'd love to hear your proposals in the comments down below. And while you're there, let me know if you want me to make more of these hypothetical what-if videos. I've had a couple in the back of my mind for a while. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my video on the Fatui Harbingers if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.